How to win the war against inflation. Inflation is a silent budget killer. It causes the price of everything to go up, from our food, transportation, clothes, and even fuel. In Ghana, our situation is quite peculiar, as inflation keeps on rising by the months. But wait, do not panic. There are actions to take and things to avoid to help you win the war against inflation. Here are 4 basic ways to do so. 1. Reduce your expenses. Take a closer look at your expenses. Consider the things that you can cut out and the things that you can reduce. Some expenses to look at are your airtime, your data bundle, and your recurring subscriptions like Netflix, Apple Music, and Spotify. 2. Buy in bulk. Buy non-perishable goods and foods that have a longer staying period in bulk. 3. Lifestyle adjustments. Consider some lifestyle adjustments. For example, you can cook more at home and eat more from home. You can also engage more in indoor activities other than outdoor activities. 4. Increase your income. Find flexible jobs that you can do to earn extra money to cover your immediate expenses. Some jobs that you can explore are rideshare services like Uber and Bolt, or online jobs from sites like FlexJobs and Upwork. Join a Bednell Finance community today to learn more about how you can improve your personal finance.
Welcome back, guys. Thank you guys for joining. I want to say good evening to everybody that's watching us. This is Bethel Finance. And as always, we are the startup that's asking the right questions. We are constantly engaging people to share their opinions, as well as their expert insights on certain things, certain very, very good topics that I feel is important, what we feel is important to the general Ghanaian populace. And today or tonight will be no different. So we're hosting a webinar. We're talking about the importance or understanding economic indicators and how they affect you as a Ghanaian. And we're not doing this alone. We've actually invited some very, very knowledgeable experts, financial experts who are industry players that have a deeper insight on what we're about to talk about today. So my name is Leslie Amandi. I'm with Brethnell Finance. And if you're watching us, I want to say thank you. Be sure to share, because what we're about to talk about in the next 1 hour, 30 minutes is very, very important. And I feel like everybody can benefit from it, right? Okay, so economic indicators and how they affect you. Once again, as always, the call to action is to download our applications that's on Play Store and App Store. You also join the Bethel community, engage us on our social media. We have a very active community of about close to 5,000 people, both students and workers, that are constantly getting insights that are very, very important. Right, so without further ado, I think I'd like to invite our speakers. We have today on the call, we have very, very good people that I'm personally honored to be to share this space with and talk about these kind of relevant things. And so the first person I'll be introducing is the founder and editor of CD Talk. You know, if you've been in any kind of, if you've tried to research on any kind of finance or topic or something in Ghana, then you should have come across cdtalk.com. So he's in the person of Mr. Jerome Kusi. So Mr. Jerome, you're welcome to tonight's space.
Thank you very much, Leslie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm very honored to have you here. So our second speaker, who's also a very, very big financial inclusion advocate, and he's also a savings campaigner. So he's a financial advocate. He's also very big in the space. I'm super honored to have the person of Mr. Patrick Barr, also on our space tonight. Mr. Patrick, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Leslie.
Yes, Mr. Patrick. Yeah, so thank you guys for joining us. We know that your time is very, very valuable. As a financial institution, we recognize that time is money. So I'll make sure to keep this very, very informative. I know you guys are here, so everybody that's here is going to get worth, their time's worth, right? Yeah. So I'm going to make it brief, and then I'll leave the rest to you guys to just, give us your insights. But tonight we want to talk about economic indicators and how they affect the average Ghanaian, or how they affect you, right? But I'd like to start with, I think the question on everybody's mind is, it's rather not vague per se, but it's rather a broad topic. So, Mr. Jerome, I'd like to just for you to give us a brief explanation on what economic indicators are, and basically why is it important for us to know or even draw our attentions to in economic indicators. So, Mr. Jerome, you can go, and then Mr. Patrick too, you can give us your 2 cents on it, and then we can start.
Okay, let's hi, Patrick. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Okay, when let me go back a bit and look at economics as a field. Traditionally, economics has been interested in the actions taken by individuals and firms. So, a minute, let me adjust my camera.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's a bit better now.
Yes.
But traditionally, economics has been interested in the activities of firms and individuals in terms of how they take decisions, trying to maximize the kind of output they have, they can get out of the resources they have. But
Okay.
when we look at from the beginning of the 20th century, more and more economists became interested in looking at how the, a country, and in fact globally, how on the aggregate, if you take all individuals and businesses together, how do they behave? How do you know when it's not just about whether individual A or company A is doing well, but you can go larger to say that country A or country B is performing well. So the whole idea of indicators was trying to find some ways, okay, some measures to understand how an economy was doing, to be able to compare economies against each other, and to be able to compare economies from one time period to another. And so that's the whole idea of an economic indicator. It's not a perfect science, because anybody who's ever had to do a survey knows that you need to do sampling. They know data
Okay.
is incomplete. They know data may be unreliable sometimes, but it is economists' way of understanding on the aggregate how a particular, shall I say, country or region is performing over a period of time and compared to its peers. So some of the most popular indicators are the inflation rate, which simply measures how quickly prices are changing in an economy from one time period to another. We look at the GDP growth rate, which simply looks like at how much is the national output changing from one period to another. We can look at interest rates, which look at how much lenders are requiring from people borrowing money in order to lend them money. And all these things, I'm sure we'll get to them. It's an attempt by economists to try to understand how well shall I say, an economy is performing on the aggregate and not just on the individual and firm level.
Yes, yes. So, yeah. So history behind it. So, Mr. Patrick, you can just give us, what economic indicators are.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leslie. And I think my work today will be a bit softer if Jerome always start the discussion. I think he has started on the key highlights of what economic indicators are. I think I will just have to add that, as Jerome said, we are looking at the strength of an economy. As an individual, the strength of your finances is found in the strength of the economy you find yourself. So what happens with the economy that you find yourself is what we mean by economic indicators. So if the whole country as a group is not performing on certain indicators that have been internationally accepted, by way of, as Jerome said, you are looking at inflation, you are looking at GDP, you are looking at the policy rate and all of that. If they are not performing well, it has direct impact on you as an individual by way of your finances, by way of the work that you are doing, by way of even your investment. So that's what economic indicators are. And as Jerome said, there has been some work that has been done on enlisting and defining what they are so that we can compare one country to another. We can compare a period to another period. And I'm sure in Ghana, every time you hear this argument between one party to the other, because they are comparing the performance of the economy according to certain duration. So that's what economic indicators basically are. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I think we've gotten a very, very a good insight on what it is we're about to talk about today. So I think we can set the ball rolling by asking. I speak for the layman. I speak for the average Ghanaian, right? That's why the fact that I speak for the average Ghanaian. The illiteracy rate of this country is still quite high. When we talk about the bulk of the populace that actually does the voting, the people that put people in power, the bulk of them still quite high. The literacy rates among them still quite high, right? So, what are some of the most common economic indicators? This is my question to you, Mr. Patrick, that you think that every Ghanaian should not even understand, but then just have an idea of, like the average Ghanaian. What are some of the most common or important economic indicators that every Ghanaian should have an idea about?
Okay, thank you very much. So, because I'm on the call with Jerome, I will take just two, and I'm sure he will take the rest so that we don't overlap with our responses.
Amazing.
So, for me, the first indicator that people should be concerned about from where I sit is inflation. And inflation basically means the rate at which prices of goods and services rise. So sometimes you hear people say that, okay, last month inflation was, let's say, 52%, and now it has come to, let's say, 44%. So it means that price of goods and services are coming down. Now, that's not the meaning of inflation. It means that if between last month and this month, the price of a product increased by 50 cedis from 100 cedis, let's say from 100 cedis to 150 cedis, which tells us that it increased by 50 cedis. And the next month, the price of that same commodity moves from, let's say, 150 cedis to 180 cedis. It means that the price of that commodity has gone up, but the rate at which it went up between this month and last month has gone down. So you see that the rate of inflation for this particular month will drop. But it doesn't mean that the prices of goods and services have gone down. So that's what inflation basically means. The rate at which prices keep rising in the country. When you go to the advanced countries, until recently, where we had this global recession and all of that, countries like America, UK, developed countries, they were experiencing sometimes even less than 2% rate of inflation. It means that when you buy something from a store or a shop or a mall, and you go back the next month, the rate at which the price will change sometimes is less than 2%. So that's the advanced countries. In Ghana, ours has been always moving around the 15s to up to the 20s until recently, where we started experiencing last year up to the 50s, 60s. Even when you look at the indicators and the basket that the statistical service is using, sometimes you want to believe that that's not the real rate, but let's assume that is the rate. So inflation basically means that prices are going up, but the rate at which they are going up is what we are measuring. So for me, that is the first indicator for someone who wants to be an investor and someone who wants to look at their finances. The second one I also want to look at is the policy rate, or which has a direct correlation to interest rate. Interest rate basically has two components. Interest rate can be taken from the fact that if I want to invest, how much interest or how much profit am I making on my investments? So if I have 10,000 cedis today and I go to a bank and I want to put the 10,000 cedis with the bank for 3 months, how much interest am I going to earn on that 10,000? So that's interest rate. The other side of the interest rate is what we call the lending rate. Here we are talking about if you are someone who wants to borrow money from the bank, how much are you paying on the loan that the bank is giving you? And whenever there's an increase in policy rate by government, so government says that I've increased policy rate, what it means is that if the government or Bank of Ghana is giving monies to the banks for them to also lend to you or use it for other projects, how much is the Bank of Ghana charging these banks? Now, whenever the policy rate goes up, it means that the banks are taking money from Bank of Ghana at a very high rate. And the impact of that is that if you and I, we also go to the bank to borrow money, chances are that we are going to also enjoy higher rate. So whenever policy rate goes up, yes, it may have impact on people that have investments with the banks, because now people will also be looking for more rate on investment, because sometimes it has direct impact on treasury bill rate. But the key thing for business and people that borrow money is that once policy rate goes up, your loan interest will go up, or if you are going for a new loan, it will go up. Or if the rate that you are enjoying on your loan is what we call the floating rate, and I'm sure we'll come back to it. Floating rate basically means that your loan rate is pegged to the economic factors, market conditions. So it means that if policy rate goes up and the interest rate in the country goes up, it means your interest you are paying on your loan may go up the following month. And that is why, for me, it's a very important indicator that we should all keep our minds to. I push the ball to Mr. Jerome now.
Amazing. Mr. Jerome.
Yes, I think Patrick touched on what I would consider the two most important indicators. That is looking at Ghana's economy. You can't go beyond inflation and the policy rate. But I have two indicators which I think are usually overlooked by your average investor. And I think looking at Ghana's specific economy, they are actually really important. The first one is the budget deficit. The budget deficit is simply a measure of how much the government's expenses exceeds revenues for a particular period. So if the government plans to, the government spends 100,000 Ghana cedis, for example, and they raised only 80,000 Ghana cedis, it means we have a budget, we have a fiscal deficit, sorry, of 20,000. And then what I've noticed over the years is that any time the government um, experiences a large fiscal deficit, it's usually expressed over GDP. So maybe 5% of GDP or 10% of GDP or whatever. You realize that whenever the government starts to experience double-digit um, fiscal deficits, then what happens is you should expect new taxes the next year. You should
Okay.
expect cuts in government spending. You should expect perhaps them to start engaging the IMF for an extended credit facility, or you should expect inflation to start going up. So I consider the budget deficit to be a lead variable. By lead variable or lead indicator, it simply means that when you see it, when you see something happening to it, you should expect something happening to the other indicators. So if
Okay.
the government is going into an election, decides to blow the budget, and comes to announce a fiscal deficit of 15% of GDP, you should expect taxes to start rising the next year. You should expect inflation to go up. Okay, you should expect the cedi to start depreciating. And so the budget deficit, if you look at from the deficit from 2020 and 2021, I think that we had deficits of higher than 15% of GDP. When you see, and if you recall, the government had passed a law that was supposed to ensure that the deficit will not exceed 5% of GDP. But
Okay.
that was put aside because of COVID-19. So when we hit levels of 15, 17% of GDP, that should tell you that taxes need to go up to cover that fiscal hole that has been created. And so that's the fiscal deficit is one thing investors should look out for. The next thing, which is specific to Ghana, okay, because talking, I'm
Yeah.
not talking
Yeah.
about
Our audience is mainly
overall,
Ghanaian.
yeah,
Yes.
mainly Ghanaian, is the Bank of Ghana reserves. Okay, how many months of import cover do the Bank of Ghana reserves cover? So, for example, we know that Ghana imports, say, 3 to 4 billion US dollars worth of fuel every year. Okay, and so the Bank of Ghana needs to have dollars in its reserves to be able to finance these purchases. Okay, because when we export our things and our commodities and we get dollars, it goes to the Bank of Ghana. When we collect US dollar loans, it goes to the Bank of Ghana, okay, as part of its reserves. And so um, when you start seeing the reserves going down, we go from 6 months of import cover, which should mean that if another dollar does not accrue to the Bank of Ghana, if all the taps are closed, we will be able to finance imports for 6 months. We'll be able to pay for our imports for 6 months. Okay. When you see it start declining from 6 months to 5 months to 4 months, and as per the last Bank of Ghana update, we are down to 2.8 months of import cover. What that tells you is
Okay.
that the Bank of Ghana's reserves are very low. And that should trigger the mind of every investor that the currency is weak. Okay. The prospects for the currency are not too good because the Bank of Ghana needs to replenish its reserves. How can it do that? It can do that when the government borrows, it can do that by increasing exports. And if you look at the fact that we are unable to get access to the international markets right now, the level of the Bank of Ghana reserves should be of concern to every investor. And it should tell you that the prospects for the cedi as at now, just looking at the information we have on the reserves, are not too good.
Okay. Mr. Jerome, you are answering some of the questions that I've not even yet asked. And at the same time, so you are bringing a lot of questions that I didn't even prepare for. But then at the same time, yes, I think what you've said so far, what Mr. Patrick and Mr. Jerome, what you've said so far are really, really insightful things that personally, before this, my mind had no, I mean, when we talk about economic indicators, obviously, as a concerned citizen, I know of inflation rate, I know of the GDP, but some of these things that you are saying are very new to me, you know. But I have to say, so I was going to speak on the cedi later, but now that we're on the topic, I think we can just speak on it, right? So the devaluation of the cedi, right? I think that's something that is on almost every Ghanaian's mind, right? How did we get here? And so the question is in two parts. So if you can take one, right? So how did we get here? Basically, how did the cedi go from 5 cedis to $1 to, I think today it's about 14 cedis to a single dollar, right? And so this is the first part of the question. How did we get here? And also, do you think it's possible for us to ever come back to maybe 5 cedis to $1? Right. So I think anybody can take the first part, and then the other will take the second part, right? So first of all, how did we get here? How did the cedi go from 5 cedis to $1 to 13 cedis to $1? And also, do you think it's possible for us to ever come back to the way things were maybe 5 years ago? So, Mr. Patrick, I think you can take the first one. Yeah, Mr. Patrick, I think you can take the first one.
Okay, thank you very much. So the question is, how did we get here?
Yes.
There has been a funny expression or statement that I heard some years back that says that when you go to a place and you see two people fighting and you are trying to separate them, you've tried your possible best and they are still not agreeing, you need to ask yourself, what happened the other day? So they are not just fighting for today, they are fighting for what happened in the past. So the challenge of Ghana when it comes to our cedi is something that has been generational, and almost every government that comes in tries to dance around it, try to hold the size of it, and when their time is up, they go, the next person comes. It's a cycle. It's a cycle because over the last, if not 10 or so years, we have always been pampering the cedi by going to the capital markets for loans in foreign currency to cushion the strength of the cedi. The cedi always depreciates in around 2 cycles. So the first cycle is that when the year is coming to an end, there's pressure on the cedi to get pressure on the cedi because we have to convert it into dollars to be able to get goods for the season, the Christmas season. So there's always pressure on the cedi around the latter part of the year. Then the second cycle is at the beginning of the year, where foreign companies that have traded in the country will have to now repatriate their profits alongside those that also went for goods within the last part of the year. They have to restock. So that also brings a bit of pressure on the cedi in the early part of the year. So what governments upon governments have done is that the first part of the year, where we have so much pressure on the cedi because some companies will have to repatriate their funds and new stock will have to be brought in, governments have always gone to the capital market, gone for the Eurobond and all of that to cushion the cedi. So the cedi was actually not depreciating, but it was an artificial strength that we can talk about. So the moment 2021 thereabout coming, government was not able to go to the capital market because of some indicators that showed that government's debt was growing. Then the issues started coming up. Then we now have to now see what policies can we put in place locally to be able to cushion the dollar that we need for the businesses to be able to import and all of that. And government was not able to bring in place any other source to be able to cushion that. So that's one. Two, because the economy was not performing, and because of the COVID and all of these euro challenges that Russia and Ukraine are happening, some investors that over the years will come and invest in developing countries like Ghana also decided to now sit back. And don't forget, it was around the same time that the treasury rate in America started going up. And every investor will want to go and invest in America because of how strong the economy is. So some investors that were now enjoying because we're giving the high rate were not bringing their funds to Ghana to cushion the strength of the cedi against the dollar, because it's an issue of demand and supply. The more you demand for more dollars and you don't have it, the more your cedi depreciates. So these two factors, in my view, and other factors like borrowing too much and the interest rate also growing, has caused the situation that we find ourselves. Don't forget, whenever there are economic challenges, if Bank of Ghana or the central bank does not put in place right measures, it also sparks speculation. And once speculation sets in, it also further depreciates the cedi of the country. So Bank of Ghana sat and didn't do anything because there was so much speculation. And by the time Bank of Ghana wanted to now come in, then the issue of also debt exchange reared its head. And debt exchange, we all knew that was going to affect both the local investors and the foreign investors. And the foreign investors are also going to think that, okay, if our monies with you are not coming, what is our fate? Then that also spark another rate of speculation. So for me, this is the cause of the cedi that has depreciated over the years. And it's also because we have not over the years taken time to bring in proper policies that will help us to export and get more foreign currency. There has always been a talk of increasing our export so that our export value will be more than our import value to make our cedi stronger. But what has been the real impact of that? We have not actually experienced the real impact of that. You can talk about maybe government saying 1D, 1F. How many of these factories are even working to be able to export and get us the foreign currency which will offset the import? So for me, these are the factors that cause the cedi to depreciate, especially at the rate that we saw from the beginning of last year up to this rate. Of course, the cedi depreciated every year, but at a certain rate. The moment the rate begins to increase, it meant that there was something that was pushing it, and the factors that were pushing it is what I've said. One, were blocked from the capital market. Two, foreign investors that were bringing their funds here had to go to the American market because the treasury rate was increased there. And thirdly, because we're borrowing over and over again, we needed to now look for more dollars to be able to pay the interest on our loans, which are mostly in foreign currency. And all of this put so much pressure on the little dollars that we're generating in this country through exports. So these are the factors that, in my view, caused the cedi to depreciate at the rate that we saw from beginning of last year up to now.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I mean, I think the umbrella causes maybe, I think what it always has been in Africa, and that is what's bad governance. It traces its roots back to the right systems not being in play. Like the Bank of Ghana or the central bank, playing hide and seek and dancing around and not trying to get to the root of the problem, right? Yeah, but thank you for that. That was very amazing. I learned a lot. So, Mr. Jerome, so how can we get back? Is there a Hail Mary? Is there a solution to what we are currently facing?
First of all, let me say, I think Patrick's recount of how we got here was absolutely brilliant, and really captured how we got into this situation and how, in my opinion, we should not be expecting to get back to how things were before before this crisis started. So that won't happen. The cedi will never come back to 5. All of that is
Wow.
let's just look beyond that. It's not going to happen. What we should look at is how we can prevent things from getting worse. Now, the problem that Ghana has is what economists call a sovereign debt crisis. That is, you reach a level where nobody is ready to lend to you because no rational investor would expect that you will be able to pay back. And so, if you have a situation where a country that has borrowed from its domestic investors is now canceling some of the value of the bonds. Okay, they are reducing the interest rates. They are extending the maturity periods. They are telling you they can't even pay in Ghana cedis the monies that domestic investors have lent to it. So how do you expect them to pay the over 14 billion US dollars in commercial debt? In total, we have close to 30 billion US dollars in external debt. When one cedi is essentially what about 12? No, $1 is about 12 Ghana cedis. If you do the math, it's just not plausible that we'll be able to pay. And so, if you look at recently, I think April 14th, the finance minister and the Bank of Ghana governor held an engagement with external investors. And in their presentation, they said that their target is that by 2028, we should have debt to GDP down to about 55%. And that is around the levels that we had, say, 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So we are expecting that that's the best case scenario for 2028. That is about 5 years away. Now,
Okay.
apart from that, in order for that to happen, they need external creditors to take a huge loss on their investment, meaning we cannot pay them back what we essentially owe. They need to do that for us to get to those levels. And all these stringent taxes and cuts the government is implemented needs to all be done. Everything needs to go well for us to just get back to 55% of debt to GDP. And it is not likely that we would even hit those targets. So I think what we actually need to do, I think I can see about 2 or 3 ways in which we can sort of stabilize the situation. The first thing is that government needs to be very realistic with investors. All this hide and seek game of, for example, we have the pensioners who were excluded from the domestic debt exchange program. They are still being owed some interest payments from government. Those payments are not coming. The government needs to be honest and say that we can't pay this, you need to take a cut or something else. The second thing is that the government needs to be realistic about its expenditure. We simply cannot afford to run the public service as if we are in normal times. Okay, we've had inflation reach levels we have not seen since the 1990s. We've had um, the very first um, domestic debt restructuring that I can think of happen in an African country. I could be wrong, but it's the only one I can think of. We've had the exchange rate depreciate by about 45% since January 2022. And we've had external creditors completely shut the door on the country. The government needs to be realistic and say, we cannot afford to have this level of political appointees. We cannot afford to be spending on some grandiose projects. We need to come together as a government, as an opposition, as a citizenry, look at what we can do realistically and go by it. And if we are all involved, then we, by 2028, and then with the help of some of our external creditors, we will be able to get to some level of stability. But this whole political process, I'm afraid, is going to, what shall I say, is going to lengthen the pain. It's going to make us not take the bitter pills that we need to take in order to get back to a situation where you do not need to go to bed and wake up wondering where the exchange rate is going to be.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Once again, if you're watching us, this is Bethnal Finance. This is our webinar on understanding economic indicators and how they affect you. And we have some very amazing experts here who are just giving us, very, very rare insights on what actually is going on in today Ghana, right? So we have an app on Google Play Store and App Store. Be sure to download the app. You can join our communities. We have 2 very vibrant communities that we are sure covers everyone. You have the students community, we have the workers community, and just join us, get engaged. Every single month, these conversations are happening. They're very important to you as a concerned citizen, as an investor, somebody who wants to get your year financially right, or even if you've made a decision to try and be more financially conscious starting today, right? I think this is some of the conversations for you. Now, I have another question about the city, but I don't know if I should ask it now because honestly, it's very alarming. I think the situation was way worse than I thought. So I think we'll go back to talking about the city in a bit, but not before I ask this particular question. There's something that's very interesting that I came across, I think, last month. And I think ever since, for as long as I can remember, or for as long as I've been alive, I don't think it's something that's happened before. So it's really, really serious. Now, it's been brought to my attention. I saw something online. Mr. Patrick, this is to you. I saw something online that countries are now actually no longer trading in dollar. Right? I had Argentina has made a change to now be trading in yuan. That's the Chinese currency. So how is this going to impact? Because all what I know is that the international standard for exchange, there's international standard for exchange of goods and services. The foreign exchange, normal tender is the dollar. That's the US dollar. But now I had Argentina is now fully switching to the Chinese yuan. So how will this impact global trade?
Okay, thank you very much. So the first thing we need to appreciate is that there's an economic war that has been raging between America and China for a number of years now. So America and China are fighting to get to the top of who is the powerhouse when it comes to global economy. We all know that America has been leading for so many years now, but China, for the last 20 years, had a plan to ensure that they were moving to all economies, not just in the Asian side, but in Africa and in the southern part of America. And they have been able to make these inroads. And whenever there's an opportunity for them to hit more, they always take advantage of that. So what is the opportunity now? The opportunity now came up because of the Russia-Ukraine war. And the Russia-Ukraine war meant that the world has somehow shut down Russia in terms of its trade. Now, we all know that Russian economy is one of the biggest economy in the world. So then, China, in its quest to topple America and become the leader in the economy, saw it as an opportunity and jumped in to try and tie with Russia. Don't forget, Russia has a lot of oil that it exports. So when that tie started brewing, then we had countries like South Africa, countries like Brazil, countries like Argentina also coming on board to say that, okay, if this is what the second largest economy is trying to do, what can we also do to get some kind of benefit from them? Then that brought the issue of the BRICS that discussion started and all of that. But what is the real impact of what Argentina and China are trying to do? For me, I believe that the decision by these countries to change the currency for international trade has a very significant impact, not just for themselves, but for us. For me, the extent of the impact depends on certain factors. The factors for me means that China's influence in the economy, global economy, will increase. And if China's influence increases, because now certain big countries are beginning to switch from dollar to yen, it means that if other countries also join, the strength of the dollar will begin to go down because now people will have options to trade in. And if the strength of the dollar goes down, it means that countries that are already trading in dollar will have more dollars than expected because now the dollar that was being produced for the whole world has now been left because some countries have now found a way to also create trade between themselves. And it has both a negative and positive impact for you and I as Ghanaians. The positive impact is that because we are now solely focusing on dollar and everybody was focusing on dollar and now dollar became expensive and America could easily take certain policies that will affect us. Now they are very careful with policies that they will bring in place and policies that will affect countries like Africa and Ghana. They will now be careful because they now have a serious competitor. So the dollar will be stabilized, or if possible, and we are able to put in place certain measures that will help us as a country, they will begin to see the dollar dropping in terms of its rate to the cedi. But the other side of it is that because Ghana also enjoys some kind of dollar inflows, it means that the revenues that we are going to get and the margins we are going to get from the dollar inflows will also drop if the value of dollar also drops globally, which can also impact on our national budget. don't forget, whenever we do a national budget, it is pegged to the dollar. So if the dollar is not
Yes.
stronger, it has direct impact on our budget that we are also trying to create in Ghana. I mean, the shift will take a bit of time. It's not going to be an overnight shift because the dollar was built over years. And I believe that if America does not take certain measures right, and that is where other countries will take the opportunity to also join the movement by Argentina, the movement by South Africa, the movement by Brazil that we are seeing. So for me, the shift is not going to be an instant shift. It will take a bit of time before eventually, if there is, we are going to see two powerhouses when it comes to international trade, which is the dollar and the yen, which may impact on our businesses if we take advantage of the situation. What we need to understand is that whenever there's a change, you can either position yourself to benefit from the change, or the change will overtake you and you'll be worse off. And that's where Ghana should begin to play its cards well to benefit from the global war that is happening between America and the people of China.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that was very, very thorough, and that was also very insightful. I'm learning a lot of things. You can't see, but I currently have like a notepad over here. I'm just making some very important points. I'm using that for myself. So yeah, Mr. Jerome. Now back to the city, right? Yeah, all that city. Now, a lot of Ghanaians, in the past 4 months, a lot of Ghanaians don't want to even hear about what's going on. You know, they're just but like, we're tired. Whatever the government wants to do, they should do it. Because honestly, we don't have any control over it. But actually, that's not the case. We can make better. I'm not trying to get political, so I'll leave it at that. But then basically, so we, like I said, the literacy level of Ghana is high. You know, so when these crises came along, people were saying, but why don't we? I mean, we have an easy way out. And what's the easy way out? People were like, okay, so why don't we just print more money? Why don't we just get more money in the system? Why don't the Central Bank of Ghana just goes into its printing machines and then print more money? Everybody has more CDs to their hands. We can pay off our debts and then everything will be cool. So why hasn't printing more money ever been like a situation, like a solution to global crisis? Why hasn't that been like an option?
Okay, so I would answer your question by saying that, in fact, that is what the government has been doing for quite a long while. If you look at by our banking laws, the Bank of Ghana Act, if I'm not mistaken, the Act does not allow the Bank of Ghana to lend to the government beyond the level of 5% of its previous year's tax revenues. I may be wrong on that, but it's roughly that limitation. So if, per my calculations, the Bank of Ghana was not supposed to have more than 5 billion Ghana cedis owed to it by the central government. And but if you look at the last investor presentation in April, the government was owing the Bank of Ghana about 77 billion Ghana cedis, which is, off the top of my head, about 7 times more than it's supposed
Yes.
to have been able to borrow from the central bank. And all of this basically is that the Bank of Ghana, like, for the lack of a better word, printed money to support government because government was unable to find any other source of revenue. So, for example, people have invested in bonds. The bonds are due for payment. Government usually, in ordinary times, in normal times, let's say 1 billion Ghana cedis worth of bonds are to be paid to investors. What government would do is that it will quickly go to an auction to raise, say, 1.2 billion Ghana cedis, use the 1 billion to pay the current investors, and then keep the extra 200,000 to finance its activities. But from mid to the 2022, when investors were very, very skittish, like they were very, very sure that we would be unable to pay back our bonds, they stopped showing up for the auctions. So what happened was that the Bank of Ghana then paid these investors on behalf of the government and put it down as either a loan or an overdraft to made out to the government. Now, when you do that, that is essentially money printing. I mean, money printing, it does not have to be about the physical printing of notes. It's about you are expanding the money supply, okay, without, what shall I say, it resulting from something like tax revenues, for example. So the Bank of Ghana just pays money on behalf of the government and says the government will pay. Where is that money going to come
Coming
from?
from.
Yeah, but you realize that such activity has resulted in this rampant inflation that we are facing. And the government itself has committed to 0% deficit financing from the central bank which essentially means that it's going to stop borrowing money from the Bank of Ghana, or this money printing, this money financing of the budget is going to stop. And if you look at our last IMF program, which started in 2015, you realize that one of the things the IMF saw as a problem was that the central bank, once again, was financing the government.
Government activities.
Yes. Okay, so instead of when the government is unable to collect enough taxes, then it tells the Bank of Ghana, give me this overdraft. Okay, and that thing results in inflation. And so the IMF then told us that we should have a 0% um, um, for, I mean, forgive me for using this phrase, it's technically not correct, but just to let people understand, let's just say 0% money printing policy, just to try to simplify it. And then when COVID came, once again, this thing was pushed aside. We are in extraordinary times. So we can take as much as we want from the central bank. I think the central bank made, um, in, during COVID, they made a transfer of about 10 billion Ghana cedis to the central government. This wasn't money from taxes. It wasn't money from import earnings. It wasn't money from, say, the IMF or the World Bank. It was just the central bank increased the reserves and credited it to the central bank. So we've tried this money printing. We tried it in the 70s. It's not like we haven't tried it before. We tried this central bank financing in the 70s. We tried it in the 90s. We tried it in the late 2010s, early 2020s with COVID. And what it has always resulted in is high inflation. Okay. It will have your exchange rate depreciate because people believe the value of the cedis you are using to pay them it's not what shall I say? It's not valuable essentially because prices are rising 45% year on year. So you can't expect that somebody would rather hold that CD than hold a dollar. So they'll sell your CD and buy the dollar, and so your exchange rate will also suffer. And so that is the reason why we can't just expand the money supply or print lots of money and expect that it will solve your economic problems.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. So unfortunately, we have to come to the end of this webinar, but not before I ask one last question. And I think that's the most. We've talked about a lot of important things here, but to not only give our listeners value for their time, but also give them possible value for their money, I feel obligated to ask this question. I've learned a lot today, right? I've been educated a lot today. I have like a notepad over here. I'm making notes and trying to advise myself on certain things. And once again, this is Bethnal Finance. We are asking the right questions, and we are providing answers to them by constantly inviting these amazing experts to come and share their 2 piece on certain very important issues. Right. So please, there's a screen, there's a prompt below that's giving you information on how to reach us, and that is to be a community member. There's a number that's currently on the screen that you could easily just register and join our communities. Aside these webinars, day in or week in, week out, we are also posting some very, very important insights that I think everybody can benefit from. So I want to say thank you, Mr. Jerome. Thank you, Mr. Patrick, for being with us. But one last question that all of you can just speak on. And that, the question is that, let's say I have like 100,000 Ghana cedis lying down somewhere, right? And I want to maybe invest. I'm not too sure on what to use that. It's like latent. I want to invest. I want to do something with 100K. What are some of the economic indicators that I should be on the lookout for that I think could help me make better decisions with my investment? You know, Ghana is currently in a very bad situation. You know, the economic indicators are all against us, but I want the economic indicators to work for me. You know, so what are some of the things that I can take advantage of? Right. So, Mr. Patrick, you can start, and then Mr. Jerome, you can end it for us, and then we can bring this thing to an end.
Okay, thank you very much, Leslie.
Yes.
So if you have 100,000, as you said, maybe perhaps you want to give it to me. That's just fine.
That would be a good option. That would be a good option.
Yes.
You know what you're talking about.
I'll promise paying back in future. Anyway, so if you want to invest today, the first thing I want to just say is that every investment that you want to do, wherever you are in the world, there's some kind of risks attached to the investment. So if you are not ready to take any risks when it comes to investment, please don't, just keep your 100,000. That's the first thing I would say. So just keep your 100,000. Let it be in the bank or keep it wherever you are keeping it. Let it be there. Don't invest. But if you want to take some risks based on the factors you've mentioned, based on the fact that if you don't do anything, you are losing money anyway. So if you keep your money with you, January, 100,000, and you see that because of what is happening, you will not put it into any investment portfolio because you are afraid. By December, your 100,000 will still be with you, but the value of that 100,000 has diminished. If the average inflation for the year, let's say, stay at 40%, the real purchasing power of that money has somehow shrunk by 40%. So you are losing anyway. So what can you do to make sure you are able to turn the money around? If you have any business idea that the economy supports, when you say economic support here, we are talking about certain businesses that still thrive in economic challenges. Then you may want to, if you have not already started, you may want to do some research about it and perhaps push your money into it. Perhaps that can give you higher returns that will be able to match inflation. But if that option, you're not ready, you don't have time, someone work 5 to 8 and all of that, and you don't have time for yourself, then of course, we want to go for the money market investment. Of course, bond is out of the equation. So there's no way you should even consider going to the bond, because I'm sure if you go to the financial institutions to even tell them, they will tell you we can't even help you because they themselves, they are locked up from that place. Now there's this tricky investment that there's the rates are okay at the moment, considering all other factors. But because the one that is holding the investment cannot be trusted, that's government, it makes it a bit difficult. And we all know what you are talking about, that's treasury bill. For me, if you look at the rate that some institutions are giving on fixed deposit, you look at the rate that treasury bill gives. At the moment, treasury bill rate looks okay. And it will be able to, you may not be able to cover the whole rate of inflation, but it gives you a bit of cover and buffer that you're able to rely on. And for me, there are reasons why you may want to consider it. As we speak, government's way of raising funds from the people, that's through investment, they have been blocked with the exception of treasury bill. And treasury bill is where government relies to pay salaries because taxes and revenue do not come in at the time they want. So they go and take some money from the treasury bill market to be able to pay salaries. When the funds come in, they're able to go and recycle it. So for me, it's very difficult for me to see the government defaulting on that market. So therefore, if you have that 100,000, you don't want to go the business way, you don't want to go into buy some lands and keep the lands for the lands to appreciate, that's also another good option. Then we want to between fixed deposits and other monetary market policies. I think you can go for the treasury bill because of the rate that it gives you, which will be able to at least halve your losses when it comes to the inflation on the market. So for me, these are the options that I will look at. If you have some good lands that you can buy, because we all know that if your land is good and you buy it, the price will appreciate. You may want to invest into assets around this time, asset that can give you higher value in a year's time. If you don't have the option and you are scared of any of these options, then I would say that either you go for a treasury bill, short-term treasury bill, 91 day, or if your bank gives you a very good rate, you may want to go for a fixed deposit with a bank. So for me, these are the options looking at the circumstances and difficulty we find ourselves.
Okay. Now, Mr. Jerome, and before you answer the question, we have a question from the audience, and I feel it's very because they are the reason why we are here. So I feel it's very important for us to address this before anything. Now, somebody says, I have a question, and it says that it's rather strange that the Bank of Ghana does not exercise its autonomy when it comes to decision making. It appears that the central bank does not appreciate its autonomy. Do the speakers have any thoughts on the policy position of the Bank of Ghana? So, Mr. Jerome, I think you can take this one.
Okay, I think the Bank of Ghana, and if you look at the job of the Bank of Ghana governor, it's not an easy one. Apart from the fact that the Bank of Ghana governor is essentially appointed by the president, you are talking about the fact that you do not want a situation where the monetary policy, which has to do with the level of interest rates, the level of currency floating in the economy, it's not in conflict with the fiscal policy, which has to do with the level of taxes and the level of spending in an economy. So if usually the central bank and the government, okay, or the finance ministry are trying to collaborate to ensure that we have inflation at a low and stable level. And so it is very, very difficult to say that the central bank governor should do something which is completely at odds with what the Ministry of Finance is looking at in a specific period. For example, we had COVID-19, okay, and let's say inflation starts rising during COVID-19, and the central bank governor says that my job is to ensure that inflation is low. So with inflation rising, I'm going to raise interest rates. Meanwhile, due to COVID-19, businesses are cutting staff. Okay, nobody is investing. No, people are trying to save their monies, and the rate of GDP growth is negative. Okay, and you say that at that time you want to raise interest rates, which will make it even more difficult for businesses to borrow to be able to expand or stay afloat. You can't do that. Okay, so there's always a level of collaboration that is needed between the central bank and the finance ministry. But with that said, um, if you look at advanced economies, like say the United States, you realize that there have been years when the government is trying to spend too much in order to win an election, for example. And then the central bank is raising interest rates, trying to cut down this level of economic expansion. I think the classic case that you hear about in most lectures is has to do with the case of George Bush Sr. And at the time when inflation was high, then we had the central bank governor at that time. Sorry, I've forgotten the Fed president. I've forgotten his name. He was raising interest rates astronomically to the point that the economy went into a recession, and it cost Bush Sr. the election. But he said his job was to ensure that he would break the back of inflation, and he could only do that by raising interest rates, and he was not looking at the impacts that was having on GDP growth. So there's a fine line, but our central bankers over the years have, I think, erred on the side of trying to align monetary policy with fiscal policy to the point that they have not taken a look at the level of inflation and said that no, government is spending too much at this time. Let me raise interest rates and try to control the level of growth of economic output so that we can control inflation. So I think it's a very, very legitimate question. It's a good observation. central bank independence needs to be stronger than it is now. But it is not the case that the central bank governor can 100% ignore what's happening on the government side and then take his decision in a vacuum. Leslie, are you on?
How to win the war against inflation. Inflation is a silent budget killer. It causes the price of everything to go up, from our food, transportation, clothes, and even fuel. In Ghana, our situation is quite peculiar, as inflation keeps on rising by the months. But wait, do not panic. There are actions to take and things to avoid to help you win the war against inflation. Here are 4 basic ways to do so. 1. Reduce your expenses. Take a closer look at your expenses. Consider the things that you can cut out and the things that you can reduce. Some expenses to look at are your airtime, your data bundles, and your recurring subscriptions like Netflix, Apple Music, and Spotify. 2. Buy in bulk. Buy non-perishable goods and foods that have a longer staying period in bulk. 3. Lifestyle adjustments. Consider some lifestyle adjustments. For example, you can cook more at home and eat more from home. You can also engage more in indoor activities other than outdoor activities. 4. Increase your income. Find flexible jobs that you can do to earn extra money to cover your immediate expenses. Some jobs that you can explore are rideshare services like Uber and Bolt, or online jobs from sites like FlexJobs and Upwork. Join a Bethnal Finance community today to learn more about how you can improve your personal finance.
Okay. Sorry, that was a very short intermission that we had. I was experiencing network issues. Yes. So, Mr. Jerome, you were giving us an insight on why the Bank of Ghana is exercising its autonomy. You also gave a very brilliant example on a classic case where what happened with George W. Bush's um, his time of governance in the U.S., where interest rates were raised astronomically high. So at this point, we have to come to the end of our webinar. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for the questions. And there's been a very, very insightful conversation, right? I always say that these things are conversations, and we learn a lot from each other. I personally have learned a lot from both speakers today. And I am honored to have hosted this space. My name is Leslie Amandi. Mr. Jerome Kuse, I want to say thank you very much for being an expert. Hopefully, we'll get you back here again next time. And then, we can talk about some more important things. I have so many questions, but then because of time, we have not been able to delve into what I want to ask. But hopefully, maybe we can get you some other time. Thank you for sharing your 2 piece with us. Mr. Patrick Barr, very, very amazing speaker. I just want to say thank you as well for sharing your insights on what economic indicators are, and more importantly, how we can use it to our advantage, because the economy is at an all-time low, but at the same time, there are some people that are taking active advantage of, the economy. And I feel like we also, as Bethnal community workers, as Bethnal community students, have to at least be in the know of some of the things that we can do to make Ghana bearable or livable. So, Mr. Patrick, I want to say thank you very much. Mr. Jerome, thank you too. Hopefully, we can get both of you on another webinar or another conversation, or a book review even, and then we can talk more about finance. So, good night. God bless. This is Bethnal Finance Thank you, Mr. Jerome. Thank you, Mr. Patrick. And I want to say, yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you and good night.
Okay.
Thank you
good
too.
night.
Thank you too.
How to win the war against inflation. Inflation is a silent budget killer. It causes the price of everything to go up, from our food, transportation, clothes, and even fuel. In Ghana, our situation is quite peculiar, as inflation keeps on rising by the months. But wait, do not panic. There are actions to take and things to avoid to help you win the war against inflation. Here are 4 basic ways to do so. 1. Reduce your expenses. Take a closer look at your expenses. Consider the things that you can cut out and the things that you can reduce. Some expenses to look at are your airtime, your data bundle, and your recurring subscriptions like Netflix, Apple Music, and Spotify. 2. Buy in bulk. Buy non-perishable goods and foods that have a longer staying period in bulk. 3. Lifestyle adjustments. Consider some lifestyle adjustments. For example, you can cook more at home and eat more from home. You can also engage more in indoor activities other than outdoor activities. 4. Increase your income. Find flexible jobs that you can do to earn extra money to cover your immediate expenses. Some jobs that you can explore are rideshare services like Uber and Bolt, or online jobs from sites like FlexJobs and Upwork. Join a Bednell Finance community today to learn more about how you can improve your personal finance.